This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 135, about The Punisher, Season 1, Episode 13, Memento Mori.
I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders, to episode 135 of Defenders TV Podcast, where we are looking at the final episode, episode 13, of The Punisher, Memento Mori. I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your hosts, Derek.
And rounding out the group, back from my latest Punisher Warzone Hell on Earth hospital visit, I'm Chris.
Welcome back, Chris.
Welcome back, Chris.
Thank you very much, guys, for plugging the hole that was our podcast schedule last week on a last-minute basis.
Not a problem at all. Enjoyed talking about the 6 Marvel movies that are coming up this year. 6, yes. If you listened to our podcast immediately after we made it available, there was only 5 on there, but it was pointed out to us that there are 6 Marvel movies coming up, so we did fix that. That was fun. It was really good fun to be able to chat that. But it's always more fun to have all 3 of us here talking about The Punisher, Chris. So delighted that you're back and feeling a little bit better, hopefully.
I am. I feel a bit like Iron Man. I am augmented at the moment with lots of wires and drips and things like that. But I could not pass up the opportunity to come back to our fellow Defenders and give my view on this last episode.
Excellent.
Brilliant.
Coming directly from his hospital bed is Chris.
Yes, just like The Punisher, but less bruised and battered, from what I can see anyway.
Exactly.
Yes, and I presume that you had more than homemade DIY medical attention as well.
I did, and I was, as you said, severely less battered and bruised as our poor Frank was coming into this episode.
Are you sure?
I had doctors trying to get an IV line in, so by the end of it, I did look a bit like Jigsaw, with all the different holes poked in me. Mm-hmm. But overall, towards the end, they got there, and Frank still looked a lot worse.
As long as you didn't have the Invisible Man bandages around your head, I'm sure you didn't look too much like poor Billy Russo.
Yeah, no, thankfully I didn't. But, guys, I've been dying to talk about this. I think we should kick off.
Absolutely. One note that I just want to make before we start the podcast. I know that quite a few of our listeners over on iTunes or on Apple Podcasts have been listening to us through the Punisher on Defenders TV Podcast over on Apple TV Podcast. Just to let you know, this will be the last post that we'll have on that particular feed. So if you want to listen to more of our thoughts about the Defenders and about the movies that are coming up this year, you need to resubscribe to Defenders TV Podcast. Just search Defenders TV Podcast over on iTunes, or just go to our website at defenderstvpodcast.com and you'll see a link to click just to find the Defenders TV Podcast as a whole. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting for possibly 2 years for the next episode of The Punisher. We know we've got season 2 coming, but
yeah, I think so. I know we've got more coming. But don't forget, guys, you can also come over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast, where, of course, we will always be updating that group with our latest and greatest podcasts. Be it, I believe the next one, gentlemen, is The Black Panther.
It certainly is.
On the Wakanda journey we're going from New York to Wakanda. Mm-hmm. But yes, so join us there. But even when there is no podcast, we always are sure to update everyone with the latest MCU news as we think. But we want your thoughts, so come and engage with us and the other fellow Defenders.
Yep.
Absolutely. Derek, kick us off with some of the episode details.
Yep, this episode was written by Steve Lightfoot. We have noticed over the course of all the Defender shows that we've done that having the showrunner of the show writing the final episode and the first couple episodes does kind of show you that their guiding hand has been behind it the whole time and that they knew where they were going all the way through it. It's only really happened once in one of the shows where a showrunner stepped away from the show before the end of the season. I think we know which one that was.
Yes, yeah. Unfortunately. The dishonourable mention of Iron Fist, unfortunately, where the showrunner there went off and did something, quite frankly, even worse. with Inhumans. And I don't think Iron Fist was actually that bad, to be honest. I think it obviously suffered maybe from budgetary stuff and the time, But yes, he went off and did the Inhumans. And if you've ever seen it, well done.
Because you didn't finish it, did you, John?
No, I didn't. There was a hair-cutting scene that I frankly couldn't believe. But anyway, enough about Inhumans.
The good thing about having Steve here, it did show, as you said, Derek, it showed he knew where he wanted to start. He knew where he wanted to end. Mm-hmm. Most likely there was probably a writer's room going, here's the top 5 points each character needs to hit. These are the war journal entries for each of these characters.
Yeah.
Go forth and make it happen. It's good to see that he brought this series to a fitting end.
Absolutely.
I think that's the best way of putting it.
Yes.
He put the Punisher where we expected him to be, and he was, again, and you could probably bring us into this, he was joined by a fantastic director who we knew has the chops to bring it forward.
Yes.
Or bring it to a whole, I should say.
I don't think there's a more favourite director that we have for our Defenders shows other than Steven Surjik, who directed this episode. What do you think, guys? I know there's been directors that have stood out in each of the seasons with their own episodes. I know Rosemary Rodriguez, when she was working on Jessica Jones, really stood out as a great director. I know having Riza over on Luke Cage was a great director. But Steven Surjik has directed at least one episode of every season of the Defenders, and also is starting to get the finale episodes of all of these shows. So.
Absolutely. I was just about to say he directed the finale episode of Iron Fist, Dragon Plays with Fire.
He also did AKA The Sandwich Saved Me, which in Jessica Jones season 1, which is still what I consider one of the best episodes out there. If you remember, this was the cafe scene and the one where we saw Jewel costume and things like that. I loved it. It had some nice nods. So he has good pedigree in this Netflix universe, if you will, from his Daredevil chops to his Luke Cage chops.
Yep.
And then obviously he did Ashes to Ashes in the Defenders as well.
Yes. One of the best episodes of the Defenders, episode 6 of the Defenders, really, really good.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of our favourite directors and the writer and showrunner for the entire series of The Punisher working together. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. As the authorities close in on Frank, Micah and Madani race to get him away from their former headquarters to get medical help from Madani's father, who saves Castle's life. After his ordeal, an exhausted but unbroken Frank vows to put an end to the war that has consumed his life. In the meantime, Russo makes good his escape to Anvil, where a bottle of scotch, DIY bullet removal, and a bag full of bills promises a new life, but not before his unfinished business with Frank. He finds Curtis to track Frank, but is surprised as Frank is one step ahead. After reaching a deal under sniper fire from Frank, Russo agrees to meet him to end their feud. Russo chooses the carousel in Central Park, where Castle's family died. As Frank and Russo confront one another, Madani is shot by Russo after tracking Castle's phone. As Billy and Frank continue to slug it out, Frank eventually gets the upper hand, but chooses not to kill Billy and instead smashes his lovely pretty face into glass, forcing him to live with major disfigurement for the rest of his life. Ooh. Castle is taken into custody while Madani and Russo are taken to hospital. 3 days later, Frank is given a chance at a new life by Rafi and Marion at the request of Madani. After several hearings and debriefs, Russo is held to account for his crimes in Kandahar, Lieberman returns to his family, and Frank joins Curtis's support group for veterans. For the first time in a long time, Frank is scared.
I'm going to save that final point of that synopsis for a little bit later on in our discussion for the episode.
I know that's your favourite bit, isn't it?
It absolutely is one of my favourite moments of the entire season, to be honest. But we'll talk about those later on.
You love that bit, don't you?
You want to marry that bit.
If
have
I could.
Bit's babies and have little side tweets. Trending subplots.
You love to take that bit on holiday.
I like it.
Show it a good time. But gentlemen, let us jump into our top 5 war journal points, because there is something I am dying to talk about. That is Point 1 in our war journal. Billy is burning his past, and oh my god, is it good.
Isn't it amazing?
Certainly is. Certainly is.
As my good friends Lonely Island said, you need to light a fire and walk away as the explosion happens to look really cool.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, completely. It was like 7 like dispensable Homeland Security agents and a massive fireworks show. I have to say now, New York had massive fireworks show in this episode of The Punisher. Not only did he like blow up a block, but also even later on, Frank sending off like the grenade in Central Park. You wonder what people walking their dog must have thought in Central Park, to be honest.
I know what you mean, but I think there is a very 70s vibe about this show. There's a very kind of different view on New York, a bit of an older view on New York as well. So it's entirely possible that they're kind of basing this a slightly different reality to the way New York would be at the moment. I am sure there would be many, many screaming people in New York, even at that time of night.
Yeah.
You know, the kids are only closing up the carousel for the day. That's probably 7 o'clock in the evening in New York. I think you'd have, although the cops do arrive very quick, actually, in the episode, they arrive very quickly after the battle between Billy and Frank. But yeah, they'd probably come down much quicker if you're setting off like huge explosions in the middle of Central Park.
But I have to say, the swagger that Billy Russo has as he, you know, sets the torch effectively to Anvil's headquarters, the swagger is very, very cool.
It's very
cool. Yeah. I really, really like it.
One, I found out that myself and Billy shop in the same shop, IKEA lamps all the way for his office. So I basically was watching TV and then turned around and went, we have the same taste. Fantastic.
I love it. It's pretty boy Chris, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just the overall scene, I loved him closing shop. And the only way to kind of, I could put it in my head, it was basically he was shuttering Anvil. The 6 slaughtered agents, yeah. I was a bit like, okay, is someone not going to miss? No, okay, right, fine. He just I was expecting more than, they know how bad he is. Mm-hmm. So the fact they sent just the 6 or 7 agents in, I was like, as he walks away, I'm like, and the rest of them, okay, nope, this is good. We're getting what we want. But over all of this, the bit I loved was the face-to-face with Curtis. Like,
definitely.
This was fantastic. Waking Curtis up. I think we talked about this before. The actor who plays Billy is so good. So, yes, he's good looking and has the Marvel abs and everyone's happy. So he looks the part, right? He looks the part of Billy Russo. Mm-hmm. Prior, the pure evil that kind of drips from that scene where he's talking to Curtis.
Oh, yeah.
It's a kind of just, they're like, how long did you know Frank was alive? And the bit that got me was there's like, when he starts going, even when we were talking about Frank over his grave, and you can see Curtis kind of nodding, going, yes, like this is true. Like that for me was just such a fantastic point. And seeing then that scene devolve into that beautiful shot with the coffee mugs.
Oh, yes. A fantastic moment.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It was a perfect setup. I thought it was going to come every time he opened the curtains, and I was expecting, and then it didn't happen. I was like, okay, so maybe they're not going this way. Maybe it's just going to be like he's going to kill Curtis, and then it happens. I was like, oh yes, this is the Frank Castle. This is the Punisher we were coming to expect.
Yeah. It's funny. Just before that as well, I thought there was really like beautiful establishing shot of that moody sky over New York City, where it then goes from that into seeing Billy Russo kind of watching Curtis wake up in bed, which is not creepy at all.
No.
And reach for his gun. Billy Russo's already been there, got his gun.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love that kind of tense atmosphere in Curtis's apartment. And seeing the curtains drawn, it was like, okay, what's going to happen here? And Frank's that kind of one step ahead. And
Well, Frank and Curtis together as well. I didn't really expect that this is the way it was going to go down. I thought that there would be this moment between the two of them, him coming back to Curtis. I think I actually mentioned a few weeks ago that we had all of our major characters together in episode 11. And I forgot that Curtis was still around, sadly. I thought that Curtis's story was kind of done. But of course, Billy would have his way into Frank would be through Curtis. Cool to have these two characters together again in a much more adversarial position, obviously, than we've seen them in the past. Curtis is fantastic in this scene. I love this fact that obviously Frank knew exactly where Billy was going to be going. So he set up this whole plan with Curtis. You don't know how long Frank has been sitting outside that window with the sniper rifle trained on the window, waiting for those curtains to open. It could have been one night, it could have been 2 entire days, you know?
Definitely. I mean, the really interesting thing is I love Curtis because he's so matter of fact and down to earth. You know, you've kind of got Billy here really taking it personally that he didn't tell him about Frank being alive. You know, it's like he's asking him, you know, did you know? When did you know? Why didn't you tell me? And Curtis simply like turns around and says, well, he asked me not to. Yeah. So I kept that secret. Nothing personal or anything like that. It was simply that I was asked by Frank not to do it. And I loved how Curtis was just kind of just so himself still, you know, calm under the pressure of effectively having a gun pointed at him in his own apartment.
Yeah.
Really, really liked that. And then obviously he gets shot and everything goes slightly bananas. I think another great shot in this scene as well was where Billy dodges the bullet as he kind of runs for cover underneath the window, and then he turns to shoot Curtis. I thought that was beautifully done. I loved the trail of the bullet coming through the window and just it missing Billy's head. But, you know, Billy's there with that presence of mind from his training to turn around and shoot Curtis. Just really good. And then you get that kind of standoff happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've mentioned a few times that Steve Lightfoot came from a background working in Hannibal for many years with Brian Fuller, one of the most beautiful and violent shows that's ever been on television. So I think he's learned a few things from that. I know Stephen Surjik didn't work on that show, but this moment, as you say, this moment of pure violence as the bullet pierces the coffee cup, that moment of realization in Russo's face as he realizes that, oh, damn, the reason why those curtains are open is because, well, Frank must be outside as a sniper. Nothing's really been said. Nothing's really been done to give away what Curtis's plan is, but Billy just has that moment of realization. And as they always say with the best types of artwork, show, don't tell. And they really show very well in these scenes what's going on in Billy's head.
Completely agree. The bit that wasn't explained, or it hasn't been explained, is how the Punisher, or how Frank knew Billy would be there. So did Frank just camp out all night on that roof, which we can come to expect from Frank?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, like he probably was sitting there all the time.
It could have been a week, you know. Yeah. It's one of those things that he definitely made this arrangement with Curtis to be there. Curtis knew exactly what the plan was going to be if Billy ever turned up, and Frank has to expect that Billy's going to turn up at Curtis's door. So hopefully it wasn't that long. Poor Frank sitting up at a roof after a couple of days under the knife and a couple of days being taken care of. You'd hope that he was like at least had lots of liquids with him and, you know, a packed lunch.
But he still had all the bruises and so on. And I mean, at the end of the day, you know, Frank was watching Curtis from a distance.
Yeah.
For a long time in the shadows.
Speaking of kind of creepy things, let's get on to point 2 in our war journal.
That wasn't creepy. That was lovely and so realistic.
Really, it really is. When you're in a small safe house, hotel room, what is the sexiest game you can play, gentlemen?
Go fish.
There you go. Because apparently that is the sexiest game on the planet.
Oh, yeah. Family Lieberman reuniting as Micro gets his reunion with his wife this time.
Some reuniting more than others, dare I say. Yes, I do think the kids probably should have been in a different safe house. And probably the policeman as well. Yeah,
those poor cops and those poor kids. Obviously, the safe houses that are provided by Department of Homeland Security aren't exactly that big. It's a very, very small department.
Pretty cramped.
And I have to say, after all of David's posturing to Frank about how amazing he is in bed, and that's why his wife would never leave him for Frank, we got, 50 seconds of pleasure after a year of waiting?
Yeah, it was short and sweet, and it's
fab.
It was cool.
I must say it's fab. It's really realistic, I suppose, after this entire time of the two of them being apart, that's what they just want to get their hands on each other after all this time. Yeah, whatever about the family reunion, these two have been together since they were, childhood sweethearts or 20-year-old sweethearts. They've been together for years. They just want to get their hands back on each other, away from the kids. It's a great little moment, but I love when Sarah just kind of taps him on the shoulder and just says, don't worry about it, it's fine. As if, don't worry, we've got the rest of our lives together. That's this moment between the two of us means everything when we're just being close. It's a really sweet way that she and David are back together again.
And you've got Micro's sexy, tight, white briefs as well.
Yeah, that was terrible. I really like the setup of this because the way that they come into this bathroom, you do think that she's going to tear a piece off David. You think that this is going to be a large argument or it's going to be the end of their relationship. She's like, I can't do this anymore, yada, yada, yada. But what you get is this touching moment, which is she's shutting him up. He tries to say something and she just pulls him closer, and they just want to be enveloped in that moment. And then unfortunately, yes, you get tidy whitey shots, but you get the really beautiful, realistic scene, which I think hopefully all our fellow defenders can understand, which is you're trying to take off your jeans and nope, he's having to pull one leg at the same time as she's trying to hop off the other. Uh-huh. It wasn't one of those very Hollywood stylized where everything just suddenly stripper pants where it all just falls off.
Yeah.
No. She's wearing skinny jeans. So it's a two-man job to get those pants off.
Yeah, it was very different from Madani and Russo earlier in the series.
Yeah. This is not about the sex. This is about the closeness of these two characters. Just wanted to be together and be close, like a husband and wife.
I think the other aspect of this safe house as well was the reunion with his kids, playing the card game. And it's that realization from his wife just how pleased the kids are to have their father back as well. Like, really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get on to case note number 3 from our Punisher War Journal. Dinah Madani standing up to the system. One of the things I really enjoyed about this finale of The Punisher is that each of the members of cast really get a nice big moment amongst themselves. And Dinah Madani having that moment with Marion and Rafi in the room where she's telling them everything that she's learned and why they can't take her apart for what she's done in releasing Frank. It's just a great moment. It really feels like she's developed this confidence over the course of the 13 episodes.
Definitely. I think her character in this series just absolutely grew and shone, and I really hope that she's back in season 2. I really do hope that they make Dinah Madani a permanent character in this series.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is one of Frank Castle's touchstones in the same way that Micro is.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed her portrayal, and I've really enjoyed her bouncing off Rafi, her superior, and Marion from the CIA.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed that. I love the fact that, Marion and Madani are probably more alike than they would care to admit. And I do like the fact that she turns to Rafi to say, I think I'm warming to her. I think that's really good.
Can I just say, I love the moment that we're introduced to Dinah Madani's father. There's no reason why we all thought that she didn't have a dad or that the mother and father were separated or anything like that. But the opening line that he says is, do you know who that man is? Which is exactly what I was thinking the first time I watched this. Like, who's that guy? Oh, of course. Obviously she has a father. Everybody has a father, right?
That's it. Who would have thunk it? Like, I was like, okay, they kept that quiet.
But there was no need for him to have even been mentioned for the entire season. There's no reason for them to even have had a conversation about the father. So, of course, she has a father. It's kind of cool that he's a doctor and is able to help out Frank. But I did really like that moment.
So, question. Wasn't mentioned that her dad was a doctor previously? I don't remember.
Her father was never mentioned because Dinah was being taken care of by her mother after coming home from Kandahar, after dealing with all the things that were going on. So it really is the kind of conversations you do have with your mom, which is, your mom's there to take care of you. She's not mentioning the fact that, oh no, dad hasn't mowed the lawn this week because he's been too busy in the private practice that's been going on. It just seems a bit realistic,
Well, I'm the opposite. I'm kind of going, they should have previously mentioned that her dad was a doctor.
Right.
Like, to basically a one-liner going, your dad will be around later, he's stuck in surgery tonight.
Absolutely.
Something like that. Passing line, we wouldn't have thought anything more of it. But then it makes sense when it gets to this point.
Exactly, because if there was a crisis moment where they needed a plumber, her dad would have been a plumber.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so it all feels a bit
the Punisher's pipes aren't working. I'll call my dad. Well, actually, his pipes weren't working in this either, as we see with the very amazing draining scene of his lungs. But yeah, I'm with John on this, which is they should have previously mentioned passing her dad was a doctor rather than go, lads, we need a doctor because pretty much Frank's dead if we don't find a doctor. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, oh, hold on. Let's just make one up out of thin air.
Well, that's what writing is all about. No, I am genuinely joking. Obviously, all the things that Dinah's gone through during this season, you would have expected that her father being as close as he seems to be to Dinah, because she just brought the body of a known terrorist into her home, filled full of gunshot wounds, and he takes it on and just deals with it. Obviously, they are very close. So, yes, you would have expected that earlier on in the season when she lost her partner. Everything else that was going on with her after her being beaten up, after her going through the things that she's gone through throughout the season, you would have expected her dad to have shown up at some point. But knowing that he's a doctor does mean that he works all hours of the night, so he may not have been able to get out of work.
Yeah.
Stop being a Madani apologist here. This is what you are becoming. And I sound like I'm cutting on this. It's not. I did enjoy the scene. I thought it was well done. There's a couple of minor things that I would change. But one of them was the mother going, he's a known terrorist, yada, yada. You can't treat him. We can't have him here. It's against the law. Typically, in these types of scenes, what you would usually expect is when someone is being the antagonist going, oh, we can't save this man. He's a terrorist, blah, 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 blah. The doctor would always turn around and kind of do a very much Bones in Star Trek situation going, I'm a doctor, goddammit. I took the Hippocratic Oath. I have to save everyone. You expect them to fall on that because that is what happens. Like a doctor... And now, my assumption is once you take the Hippocratic Oath, you're basically saying to the world as a doctor that I will try and save any human life I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact that he just did it probably is that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that the conversation that was had between Madani's parents is that some people are called freedom fighters, some people are called terrorists. And then she has that conversation back to him saying, but in the past, we don't choose sides. Which is quite interesting. That's kind of speaking to their past in Iran, where Dinah Madani's from, and where they obviously emigrated from and moved to America to get away from a war, is what this very small conversation between the parents seems to suggest. So it is more about the fact that he's a terrorist. Would you treat a terrorist? Not about the Hippocratic Oath. It's about, well, we knew people like him in the past, and of course I'll treat him because I did in the past.
Yeah. Okay, I'm conceding the point there because that was actually a fantastic line. Because what you're setting a precedent, and again, one of the things that I'm going to bow down to Steve in his writing on this is that a lot of these points that you consider huge bits are passing comments pushed very lightly into character actual dialogue versus the narrative.
Yeah,
where you would expect in some other shows more like a. Now, I like my CW shows. I'm not bragging on them, but sometimes they are very, let's lead you along.
Yeah.
It's kind of, we'll spell everything out for you.
Yeah, it's painting by numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's why he's Steve Lightfoot, not Steve Heavyhand.
And there we go. That is perfect. Overall, I thought that the writing in this scene was fantastic. And I like that we see how was Frank going to be kind of saved.
Yeah.
He healed up quickly, though.
He does. And he's fairly, he is exhausted. He is beat up, but he is unbroken. I think another great line in that scene in the Madani's flat is where he's putting on the purple shirt, and Micah just kind of says, "The colour purple suits you, Frank. It matches your eyes." Because, I mean, he puts the sunglasses on as he walks off. Madani's telling him, make use of this chance that I've given you. He looks like he's just been on about 50 stag doos on the trot or something, because he's got the sunglasses on. He's slightly damaged around the face that you can really see. But I love that exchange between him and Micah. It's just one of those nice little moments between these two characters.
Yeah, it does look like he was on all 3 parts of the Hangover movies, doesn't it?
Exactly.
With a couple of MMA fights while he was over in Thailand, that kind of way. Yeah, I really do like this. And I love the fact that David also gives him a way out. There is a moment here where this could have been the end of the season, where effectively David gives him a huge wedge full of cash that he's stolen from bad guys, as he describes to Frank, and gives it to him and goes, "There's your way out. You've got thousands of dollars there. Take yourself out of New York, get yourself sorted, take back up your old moniker." Dinah Madani says, "You're sorted in my eyes. You're gone. Go get yourself clear." But Frank doesn't take that option. Frank has to go after Billy.
He really does. I think leading us nicely onto our War Journal point number 4, Frank versus Billy. At the Painted Ponies, Frank meets Billy, where they look to finish this thing at the place where it all started, at the Central Park Carousel.
Yeah.
Great to bring it back to that moment, and great to have that flashback, I think, seeing Billy with Frank's family as well. Just really to sort of hammer that home, how much that Billy was a part of Frank's life and his family's life, and that whilst he wasn't involved in it, he knew about it and didn't have that Marine honor to warn his partner in the unit. It's kind of interesting thing, that Billy, through this episode, when he gets up in Curtis's apartment and salutes Frank, even when he speaks to Curtis, you see him doing this kind of Marine code.
Yeah.
Yet the one moment that it matters, and he should have stepped up to protect, the soldier beside him, Frank, he doesn't. He lets it go, and that, I think, is where Billy Russo and his code is all that front. But this is great. I think the painted horses on the carousel are really, it's that proper freaky grin from a horse.
Yeah.
Plus you got the two people bleeding out, and I love Billy just being so uncompromising with them. Shut the f*** or I'm going to shoot you. All this kind of stuff. He's really not going to take anything from them. And then really, that fight, that sort of Central Park commando of not going commando, I hasten to add, in Central Park, although I'm sure there's plenty of people that have done. Frank approaching the carousel and the theme park in that way. It was just really well done, and I like the way that you've got this fight whilst the carousel's going round, it twists, turns, loads of different elements to it. I absolutely loved it.
This is definitely something that you see in revenge flicks. It goes back to where it all began. The fact that it's going back through a different show, through season 2 of Daredevil, where Frank and his family are gunned down in Central Park. The fact that it's going back through a completely different show is really interesting. It's something that obviously has never been done before on a TV show, where you're jumping across to a completely different show to show something and taking it back into the central finale of these two characters together. Really enjoyed it, really excited by the scene. I think the battle between the two of them, we've seen so many battles throughout the season, so many fights throughout the season, but having Frank and Billy feel special. And what they've done throughout this episode, which we didn't really mention in our first point about Billy burning his past, what they did in this episode was really show how tactical a person like Billy is, how much planning he's put into this. He's chosen this place and set up this location for Frank to have the memories of his family, and for him to be on the back foot, really coming into the situation against Billy. So it's quite a cool idea to have the two of these guys going face to face. We always knew what would happen throughout the season. We've been talking about the character of Jigsaw that Billy Russo becomes in the comic books. We've been talking about it back since episode 1, slightly hiding it, or not, as the episodes went on. But to see this creation of him, to see this moment between the two of them where they finally get to throw down, and it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, no, I have to say, I had a bit of jargon about them slightly rewriting this. They're retconning this pre-scene to that Billy was there earlier, that they, like, I don't know, I was a bit like, oh, so they're writing him into that exact scene. And I don't think they did. What they did was this was a scene maybe earlier that day or the day before. They were showing that this place was special, but also it was special to both of them.
Yeah.
So straight away, I was then put on the back foot going, well, what are you doing? Hold on. Are you rewriting this? Actually, Billy was there all along. No, that's not what they did. But then I agree that Billy doing this, it was the only place it could have ended. If this had have ended in a warehouse or something or like that, they missed an opportunity, and they did the right thing by doing this and putting it in this area.
Yeah.
I loved that you started to see as Billy had set everything up and the kids were bleeding out. Like, that was, as you said, it's very tactical. Yeah, this man, he's tactical. I think is probably the best word. Yeah. He's very structured in that he wants to do everything that he's done. He wanted to do it in a way that put him on the upper footing.
Yeah.
Could he have done more? I was thinking about it and went, yeah, maybe. Like, if he had access to all these other things, why not have put a few, like, claymores around?
Right.
If you knew that Frank was going to go, then I went, oh yeah, it's Central Park in the middle of New York City.
Yeah.
Probably couldn't.
And it's impossible to put a claymore front towards enemy when it's sitting on a carousel going round in circles.
It could have just been a bit of a like, oh no, see how this works. Wait, oh no, it's facing me. Oh no, it's actually, that would have been cool.
Or if the little picking part of me wants to come in here, it's that, you know, when he has effectively just disarmed Frank, he doesn't shoot him in the head, but instead shoots him in the bulletproof jacket that he's wearing. So that's hours of army training well spent there, Billy. I think you deserve your mirror face and your cheese grated pretty looks.
That was brutal.
It was pretty brutal, but he certainly could have finished it off. Definitely. Yeah.
I certainly had some options, but we kind of knew this was coming with the creation of Jigsaw. The character in the comic books is created by him being thrown through a plate glass window. This time, we've got a broken mirror with his face scraped down every single inch of that. That is definitely the creation of this character of Jigsaw. As Frank says above him, you're going to learn about pain, you're going to learn about loss. When you look at that ugly, mangled face, you're going to remember me. Like, this is what Frank is doing to him. What I love about this, we talked all the way throughout the 13 episodes of the season about the commentary that they're making on gun control in America, the commentary that they're making on people coming back from war, post-traumatic stress syndrome, people coming back and trying to settle into real life or different life from the army. This commentary to me feels like almost the death penalty versus punishment argument. You know, there's people like myself personally who agree with the idea of putting someone behind bars for the rest of their life to make them think about what they've done. Sending 1,000 volts through somebody's head or 20,000 volts through somebody's head and killing them means, well, then the pain's gone. The idea of what they've done is over. Leaving them wallow in that punishment, to me, is far better choice than the death penalty. And I think after Lewis ended off in death, Rollins ended off in death, this choice to keep Billy alive isn't just a choice of, well, we got to bring that character back for season 2. I think this is the right choice for Frank where he is right now. I think it's that moment where he becomes, well, I'm going to punish you for what you've done. I'm going to make you live with the pain of what you did to other people. And you're not going to be able to rely on the fact that you'll be able to just pick up a woman and forget all your troubles. You're going to have to deal with being an ugly bastard on the outside like you are on the inside. It's that great choice, I think, in this scene.
I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, me too.
This shows the character growth of the Punisher.
Mm-hmm.
So the Punisher, up until this point, has been death is the only form of punishment.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't given vengeance or this form of punishment before. Everything has just been violence and death.
Kill them all.
So this kill them all. This is now, no, I'm going to make you hurt as much as I hurt.
Mm-hmm.
When I woke up in the morning, and he echoes, and it's the callback which I loved, to where he's like, every morning I wake up and I see my kids, and then I remember what you did.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you're going to wake up in the mirror and look at the same. And like that, I thought was brilliant, because it shows he knows he was seeing things, but he's doing this. It's Punisher's character growth, him growing as a person, if you will.
Yeah.
Growing as a vigilante.
I'm going to make you feel what I feel, but you're not going to be able to handle it, is almost the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I did love, and I think I want to go back to John's point, which was the shot, or the guns. Like, straight away, Frank is shot in the leg.
Yeah.
Like, this is... straight away, I was like, oh, this is getting interesting. Because what you are getting are two different types of fighters, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You have a very live, swift character in Russo. And then what we have with the Punisher is this hulking, to a degree, hulking guy who just takes punishment.
Yes.
He takes it and takes it and takes it, and then is able to use that to feed his anger to keep driving forward.
Yeah, it's like a tank versus a paladin in D&D, right?
Exactly. Well done. I'm quite
Absolutely.
glad. It's pretty spot on, actually.
Except there was no tanks in D&D, I just realised.
You can have brutes or warriors.
Brute versus
barbarians.
paladin, that's what I was thinking of.
I just loved that. What we see is the guns are thrown away, and then the knives, and we get a knife fight, and it's Frank is bleeding and shot in the chest and in the leg, and it's just consistent pain that Frank is being put through.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads me to this next point, because when Billy still has the gun, there's a part of me that I just don't understand, and hopefully you guys understand this. How the hell did Dinah find out about the carousel? Was she tracking Frank, or did Frank send her the location?
There's something going on. There's definitely something going on with her phone where it buzzes when she's just doing her report on Frank on her computer. Her phone buzzes and she's able to track a location to Central Park. Whether her father had implanted a micro-tracking system on Frank when he was sewing him back up, or whether Frank sent her the location, I actually didn't know this. I didn't know which one it was.
Yeah, I mean, I actually felt you heard her phone buzz, and I was thinking, is that kind of a message coming through, or is it kind of like a notification? You just don't know. But whatever, she is tracking Frank because he sent her his location, or she has him pegged through his own mobile phone. You do see him on the phone, so I do as he's commandoing through the jungle in Central Park. So I kind of felt he had sent her the location. But
does he not know anything about a SIM card? Take it out of your phone so it can't be tracked? Like he told the kid about that. Right?
Exactly, and that's...
He's not a 13-year-old girl.
And I think that's why he's not necessarily being tracked. But I mean, whatever the case, the irony is that Dinah heads to the fun park, but it's not really much fun for her, as she gets shot in the head. Like, I was surprised she was still alive at the end.
Well,
ultimately.
We shall talk about that.
Yes. And, well, maybe with that, excellent segue.
Yes, excellent segue, boys. Let's take it into our next point.
Yes, the aftermath, our fifth and final War Journal entry for this series of The Punisher.
Yes, 3 days later.
3 days later. Dinah is still alive. I really did worry about her, because it seemed as though blood was pouring from her head, and, you know, Russo in an instant aimed for her head correctly, but didn't do it with Frank. So it was kind of interesting to see that. But I'm glad she's still alive.
Oh, yes.
For sure. And I love just the fact that Frank kind of does get the second chance from Marion and Rafi when he's there visiting, or he's brought to visit Madani as she's recovering in hospital.
But just quickly to the bullet shot to Dinah's head. So Frank picks her up in his arms, and it looks like a pool of blood has already pooled underneath her head. She's had the shot to the head, and he picks her up and takes her in. I was really surprised it was just 2 black eyes that she had from the, obviously, impact of the weapon shot at her. It's not something like she's got brain damage. She may not remember all of this in the future or anything like that. It's just a real surprise that she is as functional as she is. She's sitting up in bed and talking 3 days afterwards after the shot to the head. So that's why I was really surprised that not only is she back alive, but she's out of a coma here.
Yeah, it could just be a deep graze.
Could be.
That's what I was expecting from the way she spins and the wound that you saw, and then the where the dressing is. What is leading to me to believe is that basically the bullet grazed. So it kind of like shot to the side and skimmed from the front to the side. So kind of didn't crack anything, didn't give her concussion, just kind of cut her out, knocked her out, and kind of that's what it was.
I'm very happy I've not seen anything like this in real life, because that amount of blood that was coming from her head from a graze would be enough to make me run for the hills, let alone if she'd actually been shot in the head. So I would not be a person to call for JFK's death, really.
No, you would not.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what Frank is told.
Yeah.
Let's break this down. Basically, to ensure that an international incident does not happen, they're making Pete Castiglione a free man. And then within the next breath goes, Mr. Castle, enjoy your new life. And they say Mr. Castle. I'm like, no. Which is he?
I know.
Is he Frank Castle or is he Pete Castiglione? Give me one. Because I was like, are they just going to say that Frank Castle is dead? Or are they going to basically kill off the Frank Castle persona to the public?
I think the point of the scene is to be confusing. I think the point of it is that they're saying you're a free man, and that's all of you. That is Pete Castiglione. That is Frank Castle. You've done your service for us and for the country, and in return for your service and your silence, you are completely free. Nobody will be looking for Frank Castle or Pete Castiglione again. I think it's almost as if Marion was telling him 2 things at the same time about his freedom. So go off and enjoy your new life. Your new life is completely clear of your old life.
I like that.
Yeah.
What I want in season 2 of The Punisher, because let's be honest, we know we're getting it, and we can assume there's some threads being laid down here, is this is going to be Agent Punisher, almost. He is now, to a degree, in the pocket of not just Homeland Security, but the CIA, and he's got then Madani. That's how they can keep Madani. Madani becomes almost like his handler. Off the books, Frank Castle, the Punisher, the wet works guy, does the jobs that they want nothing to do with, the plausible deniability, home turf, that kind of thing. I like the idea of that, where it's like, we have a problem too big and too dirty for ourselves.
The A-team again.
Well, again, I would like that, absolutely, if we just hadn't had a series where that's what Rawlins was doing.
Touché.
Because
Fair
otherwise, then effectively Frank becomes Rawlins.
Well, we did point out that it's
in a way. Marion in the CIA, or Madani, I should say, becomes Rawlins-esque in sending out people to keep things under wraps.
But we did point out that the thing that Rawlins was doing wasn't the problem. Him killing off high-level targets on behalf of the government and doing them shadily. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was cutting open the bodies of army men and stuffing them full of heroin to support his own life. That he was using the wet works that he was doing to support a heroin trade that was going on under the guise of these Black Ops missions. So there's no problem, kind of, with Black Ops missions as far as the US government's concerned, as far as the international governments are concerned. So they do need somebody to do that now that Rollins and Russo are gone, and Anvil's now presumably burnt to the ground. So that's not going to be in place anymore. I don't think that Frank is in the pockets of Marion or of Ravi, but I do think he'll be working with Dinah in the future. I think that's a great connection that he now has.
Definitely.
I think that would be cool for season 2, having that moment where she's going, that gang that you're after, Frank, this is their movements, this is their location, you need to take them out. So she's another kind of sphere on top of Micro, if Micro ever comes back.
Yeah, I really liked how it ended with Frank going to Curtis's group as well. And I must say, I did absolutely love Curtis's line as Frank comes in, where he goes, "Frank, I've come to the conclusion that you are a shit magnet of the highest order." What a great line that is. Really enjoyed that. Derek, over to you.
Yeah, it was great seeing that moment with Curtis. And this is, as I kind of mentioned earlier on, this is my favourite moment of the entire 13 episodes of The Punisher. Ending a season of 13 episodes of The Punisher, I just didn't expect that this is how it would close out. Frank has the world open up to him. Pete Castiglione has the world open up to him. He could run off. He could go and live in Carolina. He could go and live in Europe. He could go do whatever he wants to. But his choice is to go and join Curtis's support group. For the first time, we've seen him talk to Curtis throughout the season after his support group with other people. We see him sit down, take a seat at the table, effectively, of all of the ex-Marines and ex-military people that have come back from war, have come back from these terrible experiences. And our final line of the entire season is, "I'm scared." Did anybody expect that that's what we were going to get after 13 episodes of The Punisher, was that Frank Castle sitting in a circle of military members supporting each other saying, "I'm scared"? That was a total shock to me in the best way. It was the right placement for this character. It's the right way to treat this character, and it's just a beautiful way to end a series like this, which has had so many great highs for me in terms of what it was trying to say and what message it was giving, and the many different messages and the many different arguments it was putting forward for all the different sides of what's going on. And it comes down to one man sitting in a group needing support from his former comrades and saying, "I'm scared, I need help."
Yeah, and it connects quite nicely to the first episode, which, I think at the time we were saying, and, what wasn't going to set the world alight in terms of what it was saying, but he was scared then. That's why he wasn't interacting with people like the kid who ultimately saved.
Yeah.
He had no outlet, or he didn't want to have an outlet for what he was going through. And then in the end, he has this with Curtis's group of veterans, where he's with his military peers who have gone through similar things, at least on the battlefield.
I like that they make the Punisher throughout this series more human. Because a lot in the comic books, what you have is the Punisher being the stoic one-man army. He's the evil Captain America, if you will. He does the wet work Captain America. I think he became Captain America. It was like, an undercover Captain America? He was the dark Captain America, something like that, at one point in the comic books. Anyway, the reason I'm saying it is because they're making him human.
Yeah.
Like, that line alone, how do you live in the silence when the gunfire ends? Showing a man who is broken, knows he's broken, accepts his place, that he is to live and punish those who have been bad, decided not to go to his wife and kids in the afterlife and just accept the peace because he had jobs to do. And then those last two words, "I'm scared." Not "I'm alone," which is the interesting bit. And the bit I think breeds the great segue into season 2, which is, how does a man who didn't want to work with people, who is scared, accept the help and the friendship of other people?
Yeah.
So having Dinah, having Micro. Now, he didn't attend the Lieberman's homecoming dinner, which we thought would be a nice way to kind of end the series, which you're saying, like, Frank there at the Thanksgiving table with the Liebermans.
Yeah.
And we thought that would be a nice way. He doesn't do that. He's trying to cut his ties. And I think what they're going to do is show this man now who do you punish if you've punished everyone? So in his head, he's punished all his war is over.
Yeah.
He's done what he set out to do, which is avenge the death of his family. And now you have a man, the gunfire has ended.
Yeah, and that's maybe
in his head.
Yeah, and maybe that's why he can now attend Curtis's group.
Exactly, but it's also what drags a man who has accepted that back into the war.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really interested in. You've basically given a man the end of his mission. He's finished his mission. His tour is over. He is home. But he's home to nothing. And he doesn't want anything. He doesn't want Dinah. He doesn't want the Liebermans. He wants to be alone. He wants to just go to this group therapy, and this is what's causing him to question and be very open, which is he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, but I think it's that moment we talked previously on the podcast about this also being a very similar situation with alcoholism and with drug addicts. It's this point where Frank has actually reached rock bottom, which he never thought he would reach rock bottom by avenging the deaths of his family. He thought that would be putting him back to being in a normal life. Part of the line you were mentioning earlier on, Chris, where he says he's talking to the group and he's finally sharing where he is as a person, and he's saying, how do you live in the silence when the gunfire ends? Part of that is, I guess that's what you're working on, is what he's saying to the group. Effectively, the rest of them didn't go out, and when they got home, they had a bad situation and they went out and shot their boss, or shot their girlfriend, or anything like that, or shot somebody that wronged them. That's what Frank did. And Frank had absolutely understandable reasons for doing so and taking his hatred and anger and revenge on the people around him. But none of the rest of these people in the group did do that. And I think this moment with Frank is where he's on that realization that I've accomplished the goal that I set myself after my family were killed, but it hasn't achieved what I wanted it to achieve. I found out that my best friend, one of the closest people to me in my life, was also turned on me. How do other people deal with this situation? Maybe there's a better and a more constructive way to get there. It's the perfect cap on this season 1. I almost would have preferred not knowing that there was a season 2 coming. There are threads here that can be taken into a season 2, but I do think this is a really well-rounded story of the experience of Pete Castiglione going to war, coming back, his family being killed, him going on a rampage, and then realizing a rampage isn't what he should have done. He should have gotten support and help for where he is in his situation, and now he's found the right place to be. It's a nice ending on that story of Frank Castle. He's a comic book character. He's the Punisher. There will be a season 2. Obviously, there's going to be another reason why he comes back out of that again, but I kind of like the place he's left in here.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. I think this is just such a fitting end.
Mm-hmm.
Harrowing. I think I like that term. That word seems right to me for this. Mm-hmm. In that we were never going to get a singing daisies, shawarma table kind of restaurant ending to this, and I think it's a nice. This is the only way it could end.
But I think we all expected the homecoming dinner at the Liebermans. We expected him to walk in through the door and then they all sit down and it's Pete again with his new family around him. I think we'd all thought that's what was going to happen. That moment in the car when he says to David, I can't go in, and you understand why, right?
It's really good. It doesn't go down the tropey ending in that sense.
Yeah.
And I think it makes David Lieberman coming to his family home, knocking on the door, that more impactful. Okay, his wife Sarah is looking where's Pete, but I have to say I thought it was just so cool with his kids sort of hugging him at the door. I thought that was really nice. I think it also makes that distinction of these two characters within this series. You know, Lieberman had his family alive and was away from them, kept himself away from them to keep them alive, to protect them. Frank is away from his family, has lost them, and it's the same but different. They're both out of arm's reach, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And so they have a lot in common as much as being quite different. And I think these two endings kind of just re-emphasize that fact that, you know, Lieberman is reconnected. He has this reunion with his wife and his kids and the dinner. whereas Frank can't. He just can't, and he has to make himself a new family in some respects. So I think with that, does anyone have any notes, some final notes for this series of The Punisher?
Yeah.
I know I do.
Yeah, I have one definitely, which I think is a wonderful music choice. One of my favourite bands, Creedence Clearwater Revival, have a great song in this episode. You may remember Creedence from the wonderful Big Lebowski. Had two fantastic songs in that movie. They're a great 70s band. I've been listening to their music for many, many years. Probably actually since the first time I saw that movie. That might age me a bit. But the song that was chosen for this episode is called Penthouse Pauper. It's the moment where Billy is burning down his apartment and his entire business and killing many, many members of the Homeland Security who've come to take him away. The idea here is that the song is called Penthouse Pauper. This is Billy Russo. This entire song is about Billy Russo. He's come from the streets. He's been he was orphaned or left on his own by his mom. He built his way up to the penthouse, to the surrounded by money, and now he's breaking back out of that again. It's just a perfect choice. I love when these kind of songs are chosen sitting over the top of a scene, and it's fab. I love that 70s vibe out of it as well. Sets up the episode really, really well, as we talked about, with it being much more of a 70s New York within Daredevil as well as Punisher. But it does feel like a great setting of this showdown of the Godfather order of those types of movies from the 70s. It works really well.
Yeah, and speaking of Billy's penthouse pauperness, we have a whiskey watch here. We have Baron's whiskey being used not only as a libation, but also used as a mild disinfectant to clean out the wounds left by Homeland Security from Madani, I think. So,
yes.
Madani
did get a shot into him, and a bullet into him, and he got a bullet back into Madani. Yes, I'm not sure if Baron's whiskey is a real whiskey or not. I was trying to look it up to see where it's from. There is a very, very small brewery in New York called Baron's that make a whiskey, but I think it's like a home brewery, so I don't think that's the one. The label doesn't look the same, but quite interesting that we have a whiskey watch. We kind of had Food Watch go by the wayside after about episode 6, where they stopped eating and just started shooting each other.
Yeah, one of the other notes I have is, again, real great continuity in this episode. Like right at the end, where Frank is dropping Micro back to his home, and it's weird how things just kind of hit you. But he has a scar on the side of his head above his ear, which is the one that Micro stitched up after the hotel shootout in the episode Danger Close.
Oh, right.
And I just thought, that's just fantastic. Like, we're talking about attention to detail, quality of, the direction, the acting, the scripts. And again, this production element, this continuity element, it's still there. They've put it on him, And I think in a season or in a series where you have so much beatings, wounds and everything, to have those things kind of stay there is really cool.
Yeah, totally agree. Chris, any notes from yourself?
Yeah, a quick one for myself was just a nice kind of callback to Jigsaw being Jigsaw from the comic books. And a lot of his kind of action shots, kind of portraits, you'll see Jigsaw with a gun and a knife, one in each hand. So here, seeing on the carousel, it coming down to a pistol and a knife for Billy. I don't know. It was a nice callback that those usually are Jigsaw's. He always does have a knife, or like a combat knife of some kind. So I just thought it was a nice kind of callback there, if you will.
Just quickly, whilst you're on knives, that was a really cool moment where his Assassin's Creed blade goes through Frank's forearm, actually.
Oh, wow,
where it just pops out. Like, I think, Frank's pushing a knife towards his eyeball.
Yeah.
Like, that was a really sort of edge of the seats moment, and then just punctured by this.
Do you know what works so well about that knife? I think I forget every single time that he has it. He used it 4 times in the series, I think, 4 quite big times in the series. I keep forgetting it's there, hidden away. His hidden blade to puncture the arm of Frank was a great moment in the episode, yeah.
No, I loved it. And I thought they could have gone down the route of him opening his eyes in the last scene and pulling off Invisible Man bandages. I so like that they didn't. I have to say that.
Yeah, very happy with that.
And then finally, Derek reminded me of this, and I think it's the time we have a quick discussion, gentlemen. So now we're at the end. I think it was in episode 3 I said, let's talk about our favorite Punisher so far.
Yes.
We have a few of them. So we have Dolph Lundgren, Thomas Jane, Ray Stevenson, and of course now Jon Bernthal.
It is so weird. I never knew that Dolph Lundgren had played the Punisher, and maybe I'm glad that he didn't. I don't know the quality of the Punisher.
Oh, wow.
If it's anything like the Ray Stevenson outing.
No, the Dolph Lundgren Punisher was back in the late 80s and was very much his star vehicle to make him as big an actor as Sylvester Stallone. The fact that you haven't heard of it probably shows you how much of a star vehicle it was, unfortunately, for Dolph Lundgren's big breakthrough. There's actually some great lines and some great moments in the film. I do remember watching it as a kid. My introduction, to be honest, to The Punisher was probably that movie more than the comic books. So I do remember many great lines in there, but they were trying very, very hard to squeeze this movie or squeeze this character in the movie. Interestingly, they one of the reasons why Marvel has the ability to do The Punisher was from that movie being made and then Thomas Jane's movie being made. They eventually got the rights back to be able to do their own Punisher, which was Ray Stevenson doing his version of the Punisher after Thomas Jane. That was one of Marvel Studios films.
Warzone, yes.
Yeah.
But let's not talk about that mistake.
Well, we might want to talk about it, gentlemen. Who are your favourites of the 4 Punishers so far?
I'm gonna honourable mention, obviously Ray Stevenson and Dolph Lundgren. It's history. It was good incarnations while we had them. Their version of superhero Punishers. Coming in at number 2, the silver medal. It has to be Jon Bernthal. And I know this is gonna get.
What?
I love his character. I talked about him, and I think he is fantastic. But for me, nothing encapsulates Frank more. I think now when I think of the comic book Punisher, I think Thomas Jane. I think of the actual Punisher 2004 film, and then the follow-up, which was the short set in the dry cleaners, Dirty Laundry.
Dirty Laundry, yeah.
Which I think was like 2 years later. No, sorry, it wasn't. It was 2012. So it was a good few years later. He will always, to me, be the Punisher. And I think it's also because I love him in The Expanse and I love him in quite a lot of his other things as an actor. He encapsulates what I think is the Punisher should be from a comic book perspective. Now, Jon Bernthal is fantastic in this, and the growth of this character, they've made him they've expanded the Punisher lore for me. They've expanded the character. But yes, I'm going to say, first and foremost, gentlemen, I'm sorry to say, will always be Thomas Jane.
I think part of the reason why you probably think of Thomas Jane as closely related to the Punisher as you do is most likely because he was used as the model for many, many front covers of the Punisher. And that's around the time when he got working on the Punisher. They realised the look was so similar that they started to use him on the covers from some of the Punisher Max issues. He is a great Punisher. I do like Thomas Jane as the Punisher. I think a lot of people, he's maligned a lot by fans of the Punisher because of the film itself, because of the character of Saint, played by John Travolta, who was
fantastic.
He was in that phase of
so good,
quite a big character in a small movie and playing it really big. He can be fantastic in films, and I really like the Thomas Jane films, don't get me wrong. What he did in that Punisher has much closer ties to the comic book Punisher than even Jon Bernthal's version of it does. But Jon Bernthal is my absolute Punisher. From now on, I don't want to see anybody else play the character until Jon Bernthal gets too old. Just like most of the Marvel actors, they are perfectly cast, and I think they've really hit on something in Jon Bernthal that makes him work so well as Frank Castle and as the Punisher.
Well, here we go. At number 4 is Dolph Lundgren for me, because A, I've never seen that movie, and B, I didn't even know that he had been the Punisher. But he is my number 1 for Universal Soldier, as well as Rocky, one of the numbers that come after it. I think Rocky 4.
Rocky 4.
Yeah, so, Dolph Lundgren, number 4 for a great performance in Universal Soldiers. Ray Stevenson is number 5 because unfortunately I did see that film, and it's actually, I kind of didn't mind him as the character, but the film was just so woeful. There was no vehicle for him to do that. And I mean, even with Dominic West, I mean, like, he's been in so many good things, and he was horrific. I really like Dominic West from The Wire, from a range of other TV shows as well, and I was just like, oh my god. So
Punisher Warzone is genuinely the worst thing that Dominic West has ever been involved in.
He has done Oxford Blue as well, where he was Donald McDonald, which I watched and wanted to then probably cut my eyes out after seeing it, yes. But then he did The Wire, and all was redeemed. And in joint first, quite frankly, I'm missing out 3 and 2. Because they're different mediums, that's what I'm going to say. So I am actually, and okay, if anyone is going to pip it, if I can't do my usual thing where I pick 2, even though I'm supposed to only pick 1, if anyone's going to pip it, it is also Thomas Jane for me. Loved that movie so much. But I think that's the distinction I make. It was a movie. It was certainly a lot longer ago. I loved John Travolta in that. Kill me now. Shoot me down. Absolutely. I loved the 2 of them. So Thomas Jane does just pip it for me. But actually I would say he's joint first, because I do think with Jon Bernthal, you know, we've just had like close to 13 hours of him playing this character, which is even more than Thomas Jane. And as a result, you get a completely different experience. You could argue a richer experience from it. So, you know, for me, those 2 are joint 1. I'm going to take them both.
Wow. I think The Expanse might have warped both of your minds about how amazing Thomas Jane was. He is great. I absolutely love him. But Jon Bernthal is... I said Emmy Award winning after watching the series through the first time. I said he absolutely should be the first Emmy Award winning Marvel actor, Oscar Award winning Marvel actor. If TV could be up for Oscars, Jon Bernthal's performance in this TV show deserves to be getting every award out there. He's done a beautiful portrayal of the character in this entire series.
Absolutely.
But I love Thomas Jane too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's when he did it, and it's that period of time in your life.
Yeah. With that, and I did ban the phrase "with that bombshell" because it came from Top Gear. But with that, John, do you defend the final episode of The Punisher, Memento Mori, on Netflix? And what are your overall thoughts on the series?
I do defend the final episode of The Punisher. I am giving this 5 shit magnets out of 5 of the highest order.
Wow.
Because to me, this rounded off for a final episode where sometimes, you know, you don't quite know what you're going to get. I love the fact that they did kind of, you know, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King aftermath aspect where they kind of went through everything. I thought that was really good. I thought it really meaningful, and you really did get a sense of these characters coming back for a season 2, which got me excited. I loved the showdown between Punisher and Russo. I loved the swag of Russo. I loved the heart of Curtis and the bravery of Curtis, the absolute determination of Frank Castle, the doggedness of Madani, and the sheer techno wizardry and just emotionalness that Micah and his reunion with his family brought. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fantastic ending for a great run of series. As I've said previously, for me, I don't feel there has been a dip in this series like we've kind of sometimes noticed in some of the other Defenders. Chris certainly has pointed that out previously. So for me, this has been absolutely fantastic series. I'm in agreement with you, Derek. I really do feel that this is deserving of an award. I think it has covered so many different themes and issues, not on the nose so much. You know, it's asked open questions so that people can think about different issues that have been raised. And I think the quality of writing, show running, direction, acting has been absolutely fantastic for this show. I can't wait for season 2. Mm-hmm. So yes, with this, Chris, do you defend this final episode of The Punisher, Memento Mori?
Yes, I 100% defend this final episode of The Punisher. I'll get to my thoughts in a second about the overall series. Mm-hmm. So this final episode was perfect. It wrapped up a lot of things. Now, I say perfect in the regard of there's some shortcomings, i.e. Madani's dad and things like that just probably lay on the cutting room floor somewhere when they were trying to do a few edits. There was probably a scene where Madani was like, okay, we'll take him to my father. He's a doctor, blah, blah, blah. Something like that. There was just, this is the one thing what happens when you take the difference between a 2-hour film versus a 13-hour show with different writers. In a film, you have one writer particularly who can thread everything through, etc. Here, what we have is a number of writers, but a writer at the beginning in the first and then a writer at the end being the same, and then some story points in the middle that are sometimes lost. So this was perfect because Lightfoot managed to... He concluded the stories that he wanted to conclude in this season. And that was what we wanted. That was the ending of this arc, this story of the Punisher's life. And the Punisher also growing as a person, I think, is interesting. The Punisher's character growth, not even growing as a person, because he's still not a nice person. He's a good person, maybe, but not a nice person. So yes, it was a great end and final episode to this season. Overall thoughts on the series. I'm going to be very honest, and I think that our fellow defenders probably got this throughout. I wasn't 100% bought in at the beginning, and I think I kind of said that it was just not fully clicking with me. I don't know if that was to do with the pacing that we watched the show or things like that. I know our pacing does... It helps and hinders. It allows us to do a lot more thought into each episode, but it hinders the binge element that they usually want in a lot of these series. But I think it was more because I'm not a typical CIA noir thriller type of person in my TV shows. And that's essentially what this was. I enjoy the comic book universe, but this was very separated. There, yes, we had a crossover from Karen, but there was no real mentions of the incident. There was no mentions of even Luke Cage-esque body armor, things like that, which I was kind of hoping for to a degree. And if it wasn't heroin, maybe it had been something else, and they could have connected it through to the upcoming season of Jessica Jones, or it could have been something like that. It was illegal experiments that they were running, and they were killing the people because they knew about something to connect it. As a self-contained series, you could do this without the Punisher, to a degree. I mean, in that you could take the characters and not call him the Punisher.
Yeah.
And it would still be a fantastic series with the same actors. And I'm not just taking away from anything. I just felt it could have done with more threading to the overall and the larger universe that is, in this case, the Netflix universe.
Yeah.
But hopefully that's a season 2. That's maybe what they're setting up. And I suppose time will tell on that. So it took me a while to get into it. And I will say that, and I think our fellow defenders and you guys understood that. It took me a bit of time to understand why I enjoyed each of the characters. But I did. In the end, I did. And I think I said this to a number of people who like superhero shows, and they're like, oh, I gave up after an episode 2. I'm like, no, there's a real gem, there's a real diamond in there, because I think there's something there that transcends standard superhero TV, if you will. Because so a lot of people think of superhero TV, they think of Black Lightning, they think of CW shows, they don't think of the mental anguish that we saw in Jessica Jones and psychological horror there. You don't think about the gun violence and the racism that you see in Luke Cage. And here you don't think of, you just hear Marvel, Netflix and violence. You don't think about this thread in the story of a man, of people coming veterans of gun violence, of terrorism, homeland terrorism, things like that. You don't think of these small gems. So that is the diamonds that are there.
Unless they've been watching Black Lightning, which is a really good show, actually, of all the CW shows. But anyway.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not taking away from Black Lightning, by the way. I really enjoy what I've watched so far.
It's interesting as well, because I actually do think that The Punisher, I know you don't necessarily think it is connected in, Chris, but I actually think that The Punisher is most like Jessica Jones.
I can see that. Yeah.
In the sense that Jessica's not connected to the drugs from Daredevil, but you get Luke Cage and you have that connection. And here you have Deborah Wall with Karen Page. I think it's probably still a bit more distant than Jessica, absolutely. But I also think Jessica, in a sense, doesn't really connect to the other Defenders series in the same way either. And I think that's why I think in Defenders you had her really have to get inserted into that, other than with Luke Cage. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've heard our thoughts. You've heard from me. You've heard from John. Derek, please tell us, do you defend this final episode of The Punisher, Memento Mori? And what are your overall thoughts of the series?
I absolutely defend this episode of The Punisher. I've said it's one of the best things that I've seen, this final moment of the season particularly. But I love how it was wrapped up. I said a couple episodes ago that one of the things I was looking forward to in the 13th episode was that mix where it's not just the battle, it's also the groundwork laid for season 2, and it's also the wrap up for the stories that aren't going to continue into season 2. I can see how this would end with David Lieberman. I can see how that closes down the micro story, and potentially this will continue with Frank Castle and Dinah Madani working together in the next season, where Dinah Madani replaces Micro as his eyes and ears within the system, I suppose. And I like that. I think that's a really nice idea. It's not that I don't want to see David Lieberman back in the future, but I like that you could leave him behind now. His story's over. He doesn't need to work with Frank anymore. I like how they close that down. I like the moment with Billy and Frank finally facing off against each other in this episode. I think it was poignant. It was difficult to watch. It was tough. But I like the choice that's made by Frank here to not kill Billy, to punish him instead. And the best way to punish him is making him live with his actions. I think that's a really good way of rounding out the series. It's not about shooting everybody in the head, blowing buildings up. It's about making sure they're forced to live with the punishment that he's given to them or dealt to them. Really liked it overall. I did have an entire episode at the beginning of the season, which was my spoiler-free preview of the 13 episodes before it was out on Netflix. So I have given my thoughts of what I thought overall in the season, and watching it back the 2 or 3 times I've now watched it is actually pushing this up there alongside Jessica Jones as my favourite of the shows. It's again not saying that Daredevil season 1 and 2 are bad. They're great shows. It's not saying that Luke Cage is bad. It's a great show. It's not saying that Iron Fist is bad, but this has now jumped right up to the top tier of Netflix television, not just Marvel Netflix television. This is one that I have now watched 3 times. I'll watch again. Jessica Jones is now one I've watched 4 or 5 times, and I'm really excited for Jessica Jones season 2. I'm kind of there with Frank Castle and the characters. If they keep this team of writers around them, keep this team of actors that are trying to deliver something special and something interesting and different every time, we're going to have a great season 2 when it comes in the future. This was one of the best things that I've seen in the last year. Really enjoyable, and really not enjoyable, thought provoking as well. That's it for our coverage of The Punisher, the 13 episode season for season 1 on Netflix. But we do have some feedback on the season to talk about. John, do you want to give us our first piece of feedback?
Yes, we've gotten some feedback through our email at feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. The email is from Alex Anderson. He goes, "Hey guys, I noticed something in the last episode that got my brain turning and I can't get it out. Since I have an extra week until you break it down, I've decided to put it out there. During the final battle at the carousel, I noticed that the camera twice focused on the bright full moon overhead. Then Madani shows up and gets shot in the head, and I thought she was dead. However, we see that she has survived and is recovering. Now, the Marvel Netflix shows have not been afraid to change up character origins, so I'm thinking, since we know Madani spent some time in Afghanistan, that maybe she came in contact with someone over there that's somewhat mystical, maybe that we haven't seen yet, that changed her. So my theory is that she could take on the Moon Knight role in the Marvel Netflix universe. I know that Mark Spector got his in Egypt, but I kind of like this idea and thought I'd share it with you. What do you think? Am I grasping at straws here? Looking forward to your final Punisher podcast, and I hope Chris feels better soon. Great show, guys. Fellow Defender, Alex. Thank you, Alex, so much for that. To be honest, it's really interesting because I would, first of all, love to see a Moon Knight show on Marvel. I am certainly on the marvelously mystical side of Marvel. So I would absolutely love to see that. And I know that there was speculation previously about whether Mark Spector would show up in this, given the army element to this, and certainly given that he has a mercenary background as well in the comic books, that maybe he was there in Afghanistan at the same time as Frank and Russo. So I like that idea, because actually, you know, how did Madani survive that gunshot? I mean, certainly it looked like she could potentially die. I'm really glad that she didn't. And yet, certainly, you know, she is born into a family who I think are from Iran. So that is kind of within that ballpark, really. So I like the theory a lot, I have to say. I'm not entirely sure it's going to happen, but I do like it. And I like that idea of the focusing on the moon. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there, Alex, to be honest. So thank you for chucking out that theory.
Alex, thanks so much for sharing the theory. I think it's a wonderful theory, and I love that it's given a great opportunity for the writers of Punisher Season 2 to possibly use Dinah Madani as their Moon Knight. Moon Knight has been a female character in 2099, I think, is the version that's female. There's loads of different personalities in his head. I'm sure there's definitely a female one in there as well. So great theory, Alex. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but I do love it. And there's always good things when you can pull out a little theory and turn it into something that could create a new series. Hey, that's what the writers are paid for in Marvel Netflix. So maybe they will take that up.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here to say thank you, Alex. I am feeling a lot better, so I really appreciate the kind words. And as much as I want to see Moon Knight in the Netflix universe, he and probably will come at a later point, I don't think this is probably how they do it. I think what we'll get is the typical Mark Spector-esque storyline versus changing it to Dinah Madani. But I like where your head's at. I always keep looking for those Easter eggs.
Hashtag Madani is Spectre. Madani is Spectre. Love it. Chris, do you want to take our next piece of feedback?
Yes. So over on Facebook, we had Robert Phillips write in, and he had to say, the final episode of The Punisher was a well-worked conclusion of all the themes of the series. We had betrayal, PTSD, the death and resurrection of a major character, the return of soldiers from war, and the partial victory of law and justice, and some sex. The pretty boy is disfigured, so his exterior reflects his evil insides. It's something I struggle a lot with as a trope. Side quote, yep, I'm with you there, Robert, but this is different. Back to what Robert said. He went on to say there are many people who have an immense handicap in the world because of this myth and the variations of it. I'm sure it's not the fault of the bunch of creators, though it's making me ambivalent about the second season, if Russo, the bad, will be Frank's evil nemesis. Robert goes on to say, across the whole arc, I thought it built well to the various conclusions. My favourite themes were the way the soldiers unable to move on was played to so many people, and how micromanaged redemption and bravery in a different way. Thank you very much, Robert. Yeah, the overall pretty boy being disfigured trope, it's been around a while, but Jigsaw's character is actually pretty good, so if I recommend anything, jump in, read some of the Punisher comic books and graphic novels that he's in. I can't off the top of my head think of any ones in particular, but there's a whole list there. I'd go have a look. He's a solid character. Mm-hmm. The whole pretty boy piece is actually a good playing on who he is and what happens. So do check it out. Don't write this one off just yet.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much for the feedback, Robert. That's really good stuff. I know you've been with us all the way through the season. I'm sure you're as happy as we are to have watched the full season overall. Overall, done a really good job.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, so much for all the feedback over this series. It's been really, really good to hear from you.
And our final piece of feedback comes from Michael Booth over in our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV podcast. Michael says, I finally got through this in the weekend and wow, was that ending brutal. I expected Russo to go through a window or something, not to be purposely mangled as punishment. It does work though. Only part that I didn't like was Madani showing up at the carousel. Why? What did she do other than get shot? And by walking into a gunfight and shouting freeze and wait for Russo to turn around, smile and shoot her in the face, come on. No way she wouldn't just take him out from behind, law enforcement officer or not. That's a really interesting point, actually. Yeah, I know that moment with Madani getting shot was just a shocker. It was a real surprise. I think they kind of needed that moment between the two of them to close out their relationship, to have a little moment where they're finally able to do a little moment between them after everything they've been through in the season. But it did feel superfluous. It did feel not necessary. But at least she was there, I suppose. At least she was there at the end. She did have a lot going on with Billy throughout the season. And to just get that one shot into his shoulder last episode probably wouldn't have felt as satisfying to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you saw in her eyes what Billy Russo meant to her after she'd found out that he had killed Stein and knifed him to death. You do get the feeling she would have just gone in for the shot, the takedown shot, or the kill shot. Absolutely. And it almost feels like potentially she was the distraction so that Russo had to turn away from Frank to allow Frank to come in and get him in that kind of sequence of the fighting on the carousel. But It was kind of a weird one, definitely.
Absolutely. And Michael goes on to say, overall, I thought this whole season was great television. I'm struggling to say that it was fun and that I enjoyed it, but it was definitely a heavy hitter with a solid cast and writing and covered interesting ground. We'll be waiting to see what they do in season 2. Thanks so much for that feedback, Michael. Thanks so much for all the feedback we've received. Just a little shout out to Larry Willie Swink and Lieutenant Floby, who've both been in contact this week to say they're starting out our Punisher reviews at episode 1 this week. So just as we finish, they're kicking off their following. So I wanted to leave a little hello to them at the end of this because we won't be receiving your feedback as we're recording. So thanks so much to everyone that's left feedback throughout the season this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much to everyone who has sent in their feedback. It's really interesting to get your thoughts on these shows, and certainly one so different from the majority of the Defenders series that we've seen up till now.
Yes, and all I can ask is don't forget to continue to give us feedback. Come on over to the Facebook group where you can talk to us and other fellow Defenders and tell us your thoughts. If you're only starting out Daredevil Season 1 or if you've made it all the way to Punisher Episode 13, come over, talk to us, give us your feedback. And of course, don't forget, we're going to have the Black Panther very soon, and we'll be wanting to discuss all of the theories and how it all leads up to the Infinity War.
While we're talking about upcoming shows, one interesting one that we're going to be doing coming up, a little bit of an announcement for us. We will be talking about the Doctor Strange comic book event coming up called Damnation, which will feature Doctor Strange, Ghost Rider, Iron Fist and Moon Knight in a big event to celebrate this awesome combination of Marvel heroes. We're doing a big combination of awesome podcasts to take you through each of the issues of this Damnation series. We'll be covering the Doctor Strange book, which is Doctor Strange Damnation, issues 1 to 4. We'll be teaming up with Into the Night, the Moon Knight podcast, Iron Fist podcast, and the Ghost Rider podcast to discuss each of those pieces. And when put together, all 4 of the podcasts together will be covering the entire series of Damnation. That's coming up. The first issue of that is coming out on the 21st of February and then runs through a couple of months. So you'll see our reviews of Doctor Strange appearing in your feed on Defenders TV podcast. Just wanted to let you know, we'll talk more about that in the future as we get closer to the event itself, but just wanted to let you know that it's coming up as well.
And don't forget, to close out, this season we've been talking mostly about one particular family members, your grannies and your granddads, because we know, and you know, every granny and granddad loves a good old Punisher story. So don't forget to share the love, share the Punisher, share our podcast with the world by telling your granny all about us and saying that I, particular Chris Jones, a sick child, was asking her to listen to us and tell us her thoughts about the Punisher. So don't forget, share the podcast where you can. Subscribe over on iTunes or any good or evil podcast catcher around the world. And then, more importantly, tell everyone, because we will be back very soon.
Thank you again, fellow Defenders, for joining us for this 13-episode series. Again, just to remind you, if you're subscribed to Punisher on Defenders TV Podcast over on iTunes, make sure you subscribe to Defenders TV Podcast. You can get the link at our website at defenderstvpodcast.com, just so you don't miss out on our future thoughts. We'll be coming back around the 15th of February with The Black Panther, and then we'll be coming back in regular episodes on the 8th of March and after with Jessica Jones Season 2. Looking forward to that one. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, guys, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Yeah, as always, thank you so much for listening. I'm off to visit my gran with a packet of custard creams and a quarter of Uncle Joe's mint balls. We're going to watch The Punisher together. She has a bazooka by her bed. We will speak to you again soon after the 15th of February.
Bye.
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 I hear a lot of people saying the blues, but I'm gonna tell you what the blues is. When you ain't got no money, you got the blues. When you ain't got no money.
This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 135, about the final episode of... No, I didn't. Did the stick to the script.
Yeah. And up.
What?
Up.
Bright eyes, big smile. Welcome back, Defenders, to this, our final episode of Defenders TV Podcast, looking at The Punisher. Season 1, Episode 13.
The final episode of Defenders
I know,
TV
I
Podcast.
just as soon as I was like...
I really like the lead into this, because the way it went about is they go into the bathroom and you think she's about to lay into Micro. She's going to basically...
Well, she did.
But that's why he's Steve Lightfoot, not Steve Heavy Hand. Damn it,
there we
couldn't
go.
get it out.
That is perfect.
I think after killing
Rollins.
no. Other kid. Kid. Eric. No. Got Eric in my head now.
Colin?
Colin. There's never been a Colin in all of Marvel.
Lewis,
There you
that's it.